Good morning. I'm Jim Zemlin. I'm the Executive Director of the Linux Foundation. I'm here with Olivier from SonarSource, and we are talking about all things code development, open source, cybersecurity, and more topics that we've all seen in the news a lot lately. And, SonarSource is a recent member of the Linux Foundation. Thank you for your support and welcome to our community. But Olivier, why don't I let you go ahead and introduce yourself and then we can dive in.
Sure. Thanks, Jim. So I'm Olivier. I'm a CEO and founder of SonarSource, and I started my journey with SonarSource 15 years ago, when obviously we founded the company. Maybe a couple of words on where we stand today. So SonarSource is an open source product. Sorry, SonarQube is an open source product. SonarLint, which is also a product we develop, is open source, and SonarCloud, being a SaaS, is not open source, but is offering free service for any open source product. So we are, I would say, deeply in the open source world since we started. We started the company we bootstrapped the company with 3 engineers, and today we have, I think, 510 employees across 5 locations. The headquarters are based in Geneva, Switzerland. We have a large office in Austin, Texas. We also have offices in Germany, France, and now Singapore. Yeah, I think that's, and I'm a software engineer by education background, and I happen to be also now the co-CEO of the company. We hired another co-CEO about 6 weeks ago.
Congratulations on that. Maybe be helpful just for folks to get a very quick overview of some of the work that you're doing, with open source communities, but just with software developers in general, with your open source project and your SaaS service.
Yeah. So basically, I would say our goal is pretty simple, which is what we are trying to do is we are trying to help developers and development teams to do a better job with their software. So we have a solution. We develop a solution which is for software engineers to do what we call clean code, which is code that will follow all, I would say, industry standards, whether it's from a consistency point of view, whether it's from a responsibility. We want code that is adaptable. Of course, you don't want your software to be to be like super rigid. By definition, software contains the word soft, so somehow you should be able to change it. And we want also code which is intentional. And when we think about intentionality here, we think about, okay, you're opening a resource somewhere. If you don't close it, it's probably not on purpose. It's probably because you forgot something in your code. So we are really trying to help developers to just deliver code, which is, I know it will sound very pessimistic, but okay. We are not asking for anything fancy. Just the code should be at a standard level. So this is really our goal, and it has always been our goal. Of course, when we started 15 years ago, we had pretty much nothing. And for us, being 3 Java developers, it was like open source. What else? The whole work environment is free and open source for Java developers. So this is how we should do it, and we always thought we would be able to find other ways to monetize and to be able to pay the bills at the end of the month, and we actually did. So today, still about 75% of SonarCube is open source, and we have 25% which are commercial features, which are much more for, I would say, other parts of the organization, like people who need to see consolidated reporting, the people who need to make sure the software is going to operate, is going to be highly available. So we really separate the work we do for developers on development team, where we have this very large community. It's really amazing. If you go to I think it's SonarCube.community or SonarSource.community, you're going to see like thousands of people coming to have interactions. Sometimes it's to complain, sometimes it's to bring ideas, but it's also to very openly share about their experience, their expectations. I always found it great that because people have access to this software, they can see how it is built, they get it for free. They also feel if they can help, they should help. So it's a good, I would say it's a very good dynamic. And to your question, what do we do for open source? I think we have always been super, I would say, grateful to the open source community. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, doing our software open source was also to give back, but I think the primary reason was really what else. I mean, we couldn't even think about another way to to deliver software for Java developers. And
Yeah,
yeah.
it's awesome that you know, and I think you and I are two people who have, you know, I'm coming up on my 20th anniversary here at the Linux Foundation. You know, very rarely in tech do you meet people who've been, you know, 15 years or longer at a single organization. So it's I can remember back 15 years ago, in my case 20 years ago, when open source wasn't as popular as it is now. It wasn't a fundamental part of how software developed. But for people who, you know, were working on these fundamentally difficult problems around, you know, how do you write clean code, things like, you know, the problems that you're working on, it's the perfect place to develop that, because, you know, you get so many people who use it. You can use it as a way to refine the project itself, improve correspondingly your products, and the community benefits because they're getting something that's very useful for them for their open source projects, and your business benefits because you're constantly improving and you know, building value add for your customers. You know, I wanted to ask you,
and to add on what you just
yeah,
said, I think if someone who is watching this has never made a public commit, I also feel that, I mean, I still remember my first commit into open source Sonar, and I never thought longer about a commit than my first commit into the, and then it's okay. It becomes the new normal, but when you are doing it, you are basically pushing something that you have no idea who is going to review this, scrutinize it, or whatever. So I think it also makes a lot of sense. There are contradicting statements here, but I still believe that intuitively, I believe that open source code has generally a better quality than non-open source code, simply due to the fact that there is this exposure. Anyway,
well,
sorry,
yeah,
I
in the
interrupted
case
you.
of in the case of proprietary software, you of course wouldn't know about the code quality other than within your own organization. And so I think open source certainly is good there. You know, we talk to a lot of open source developers of some of the world's most critical software. And, you know, we've seen in the news a lot in the last, you know, 5 years, you know, Log4j, we've seen lots of, you know, there's, you know, it seems like every other week there's a new security disclosure or vulnerability from, you know, either a supply chain hack or an open source project. And, you know, I think the reason for that is open source is so broadly used. We went and asked developers, you know, hey, what is it that we could do, that the industry could do, that we could collectively agree upon as an open source community to help improve the quality of the code in critical open source projects, you know, those projects that are just kind of in everything. And they said, you know, they want two main things in response. One, more time to work on open source projects. You know, most of the developers in critical open source projects. They're employed by a company. They are in many cases, in fact, the majority of cases, paid to work on the open source project as part of their employment agreement, but they just never get enough time or as much as they would like, right? Because they've got features for the company they got to work on. I'm sure SonarSource, it's the same thing in your developers. Like, I wish I could work full time on the open source project, but
No,
hey,
no, no, no. SonarSource is much better than this, Tim.
I'm
Of
sure you are
course, of
actually,
course.
because you're so natively open source as a company. But the second thing, and this is the question that they said was, I want a development environment that's as good as the one I have at work, and these folks work at companies like Microsoft and Amazon and Google and Oracle and, some of the largest, most successful software companies in the world. And in those development environments, you have access to, a dedicated, testing team. You have commercial tools for, all kinds of steps in the software development process. And, this is where a company like SonarSource is really helpful in that, being able to use tools like SonarLint and SonarQube in the software development process is super important. My question is, how can we get the word out? I wish more projects were using your tools, which are freely available to them,
Yeah.
to lint their code and to write clean code. How do we get the word out?
I think this is us to really structurally, systematically go out on share this information with developers. Like, hey, what you have at work, you can actually have it for free at home, which is, maybe you're not going to use Cube, maybe you're going to use Cloud, but this is going to be free for open source. So I think this is on us. So bear with us. We are really working hard on this, because we recognize that it's not because we have a great product that is available for free that everybody's going to use it. We also need to make sure people are aware of this. Just would like to come back to the comments that you made earlier, which I found really really interesting. I think when we are talking about this Log4j or vulnerabilities, I think there are two things that I feel we need to adjust from a industry and even community perspective, which is, one is there's still lots of debates around whether clean code is important or not important, etc., etc. And me, of course, I'm very biased, to say the least, on this topic, but at the same time, I also remember 3 years ago when somebody in the company talked to me about Grammarly. Hey, wouldn't it be great that we all have Grammarly in the company? And me, I was like, I don't need Grammarly. I write great English. I'm not English native, but my emails are perfect.
Fine.
And then, I was like, sure, why not? So we bought Grammarly, and then one day I was like, okay, maybe I should log in. So I logged in, and then I realized how many words I forget in my emails. Sometimes I read them back before I send them, but I read them back too quickly. How many times it suggested contractions that actually makes my ideas much better, expressed in a much clearer way. No spelling mistake. Probably I'm still doing a grammar mistake, but much less than before. So to me, it's like, I still feel there are too many people who are like, I don't know, I don't even know what were the emotions or the feelings that I had that stopped me to use Grammarly at the time, but I feel we should just say, hey, what's the drawback here? Using a tool that will tell you if real time in your IDE, when you are doing like spelling mistakes or quality errors, or which is going to find security issues, even if there is, like, let's say, a 10% false positive, like 1 out of 10 it's going to be wrong, and you decide to do something else, why would you not do this? That's one point, which is like, to me, it should be like, all developers should not even think about this, it should be part of the dev. I don't know if it's SonarLint, it's SonarLint. If it's something else, it's something else. To me, it doesn't matter. It's more like it should be a commodity. It should be in the developer environment. The second thing, when you talked about Log4j, is I feel we are still very much driven here by security-centric approach rather than developer-centric approach when it comes to these vulnerabilities, which I feel is a problem. If you think about Log4j, I'm just going to make up numbers here. There was this critical vulnerability in a very largely adopted library, which is a problem. But how many projects were truly exposed by having this dependency? Nobody knows, which is to me the big problem, a big problem, because we all had, whether we were exposed, whether we not exposed, whether we had a direct dependency with it, we had like a cousin dependency, like a transitive, etc. We all had to fix it, which kind of, it stopped the world for weeks. And it stopped businesses, like it paralyzed large enterprises for weeks to fix a problem which was a real problem, but also a supposed problem. And to me, and we don't do this what's called open source analysis or software composition analysis, but I really feel there is a feature there which is missing, and I'm calling to my colleagues from these companies, which is, hey, can you tell us whether we are exposed or not? That should be like a base feature for this kind of problem. Sorry,
No, I
sidetracked a
think
little bit, but
we agree. I mean, I think one of the things we're trying to do to be able to remediate these things, understanding whether you're exposed through a dependency, transitive dependency, or not, is create more liquidity of methods of tracking. So software bill of materials, metadata, automating a lot of that process. You know, if you think of from develop to build, the package to deploy, you know, once you're in the deployment phase, going back and remediating vulnerabilities is obviously an order of magnitude more difficult than if you had caught them through using tools like yours as you're literally developing the software. And so, you know, we constantly talk at the Linux Foundation about trying to shift left, you know, the security and, you know, just I think Linus talks about this all the time. You know, security vulnerabilities are essentially just bugs in software, right? They're usually just poorly written software, and there's a variety of ways to deal with that. But you know, one of the things that we struggle with, and we want to get the word out more at the foundation, is at the origin where developers are creating software, particularly those projects that we all collectively depend upon, right? The top, let's say, 5,000 packages of, you know, what, you know, let's say top 200 per language, you know, all the operating system packages that make up a typical Linux operating system. Those are the ones that everybody truly cares about. How do we provide free access to high quality tools, high quality training about how to, you know, engage in software development, write clean and secure code, to be able to document that code effectively, to be able to then distribute that software in a secure manner? You know, those are the things that we're really trying to focus on. So, you know, when SonarSource joined the Linux Foundation, I was like, this is awesome, because we want to work with you, you know, and that's my question, you know, how can we help SonarSource? You know, you're a member now. We'd love to get you involved in getting the word out that, you know, hey, these tools are available. You know, we have projects in the telecommunications sector that are used to, you know, run the, you know, mobile networks of that power billions of subscribers. They're written in Java. You know, how do we get your tool? How do we get the word out that, hey, go and use this thing? Like, you know, it's it's certainly better than not using Grammarly, to use your metaphor, right? Use something.
Yes.
You know, how can we work together to get that word out?
Yeah, I think I think there are two parts, which is one is some education, like exactly what you said, which is the cost of any problem. The more you wait, the more the cost, the higher the cost is going to be. There is also another aspect, which is so the cost, I would say, is more for the maybe for the business, but for the developers is, hey, the more problem you introduce, the more problem you're going to have to fix, because it's unlikely that the more problem you're going to have to fix later, which means when you fix this problem, you're not, it's not going to be very interesting. All this rework is not the best part of our jobs. So by not introducing the problem, you won't have to fix it. So to me, there is this educational aspect, and then there is a tooling aspect, which, as you mentioned, is available. It's either it goes in the IDE through an add-on, so extremely simple. You need to know it exists, or you can use that on SonarCloud. I think probably another thing where we should work together is to really also educate teams or devs on the approach to clean code, which is we have this approach which we call clean as you code, which is by far the most optimal way of having your clean code. It basically consists of saying you don't bother with existing code, you only bother about the code that you add, the code that you change. Any code that you produce or you change, what you are saying is it's going to have to be clean. And it has two very nice upsides. One is, of course, all the new code added or changed is going to be clean. But also, if you think about it, because we keep changing software, actually, we are also going to pay back the debt that we have already, because when we refactor, this is going to be considered as new code. Industry standard is like organizations tend to change in average 20% of their code every year. So think about it. If you just follow this, which is if you say from now on, we're going to do a okay job, you are actually going to also remediate legacy code, which is really cool. Every time you fix this kind of problem, you are actually improving your work environment as a developer, which is really good. So
Yeah,
I think by sending this, by sharing these messages with your community, by helping us to share these messages, it will be really helpful.
You know, the industry collectively, open source project maintainers experience this all the time. We're great at finding vulnerabilities, but we're terrible at actually getting in there and doing the work to fix those vulnerabilities, which is your point, right? It's like the more of that you can do up front, the less, bugs and issues you have down the line, the more time you're going to have to work on interesting features and better ways to improve that project. And that's a word we really want to get out, and we'd love to have your tools as part of that, for especially in the Java world where we're seeing a lot of these problems happen.
Yeah, Java, but also now C++.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
all
And we
major
need that even
languages,
more.
basically. Yeah. Well, there are tools there, but not so much a culture around the quality of code. So I think we can probably be even more effective there.
I had one question for you. So everybody today is talking about generative AI and, how that can, now, Grammarly, to ChatGPT, it doesn't just correct your grammar, writes the whole sentence for you. What is your view in terms of how generative AI will change the way, companies and products like yours work with, developers in the future?
Yeah. So I think Gen AI is already, I would say, already somewhere in the developer toolbox. Not for all developers, but in a lot of developers were curious, started to install it. I think we use it at SonarSource. I do not code anymore, so this is not my feedback. This is a team's feedback here. The gain in efficiency depend upon people to their arguable depending on the type of
Yeah.
code that you're writing, etc. So I think this is work in progress, but overall, people are pretty positive that it's going to be a productivity tool for developers, for, I would say, senior developers, people who really understand what needs to be done, understand how they can best use the tool to save themselves time.
Yeah, we're seeing sort of a bell curve where a junior developer, they don't have a lot of context, so they can't tell, like, is this result good or bad? They don't know.
Yes, exactly.
Senior developer, this is right. Oh, wait, I need to modify that. The output wasn't quite right. It's a huge productivity enhancer. And then the other end of the bell curve, you have like a savant genius developer who's like, this thing's just getting in my way, right? Like, I know how to write. So this would be the perfect grammatition to again continue the metaphor. But the senior developer who has context
Yes,
is very good. Writing's not thinking,
yes,
and that's the big difference in the productivity gains in our observations.
absolutely. And I think it's also going to bring some extra information to people who develop, who they will be willing to have. It's a little bit of sometimes a bit of a distraction, but sometimes it's helpful. So I think people are generally happy to have this. So to me, I mean, to our industry, to this clean code industry, I think it's a pretty good news, which is, if you think about productivity, you think about lines of code. The more lines of code there are out there that are being written, the more work we have. So I think it's a good thing for us. I also feel that having all this code which is generated means the developers, they are not writing it. They need to read, as you mentioned, to understand the context and to maybe adjust certain things that are. This is not an easy job, and it's, stuff might fall through the cracks. So having some other tools that are going to review this becomes even more critical for industries. I would almost say it would be irresponsible to generate all this code and have nothing between the code generator on your production.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You're seeing this sort of the most relatable way is generative AI created social media posts where they're just obviously bad, right? It's like, this is no human or normal person would write this way. And in the case of a social media post, it might be offensive or just weird. In the case of software, it could be a serious problem. So I totally agree, like, being able to have that good judgment, being able to have other tools, just there's no panacea. It's a multiple tools, which is one question I really want to make sure we get to, two questions, I should say. One, I'm an open source developer. I'm working on a project now. One, how do I take advantage of your tools? You mentioned the IDE, you mentioned the SonarCloud. Also, once I start using, let's say I've got an idea of how I might improve this, or I find something that I want to fix. How do I get into the open source project and start contributing and participating? So the two questions are, how do I use the tool?
Yeah.
How do I contribute to the tool?
Okay, so on the first question, I would say as a developer, best thing is you go to the marketplace of your IDE, you type Sonar, and unless you use something very exotic as an IDE, you're gonna find something called SonarLint that you can install, and from there, hopefully it's gonna work immediately. Basically, it's gonna highlight problems in your code as a linter. So if you're more like somebody who is looking after a team, I would recommend you go to sonarsource.com, go to products. You have two flavor of our team product, which is either SonarQube or SonarCloud, depending on what you prefer. And then you follow through. Again, it's pretty standard the way you you set this up. We integrate with the most popular DevOps platforms to really have a seamless experience. On your second question was
the open source project. How do I get
the
in
open
there?
source
How do I
project. So basically, we on our community, we are very clear that the contributions that we expect, they are more like user contribution more than developer contribution. We have really a user community, not so much of a developer. We accept developer contribution, but we feel that the real value, we have plenty of developers at SonarSource, and it starts to also be a fairly large project. So we felt that the best kind of interactions that we can have are through using the product. So this is how we would expect as a feedback to come. We have a forum called sonarsource.community where you have all sorts of categories. You go there, and over there you have lots of people from SonarSource who watch that on our engineers. They tend to go there and watch it. They want to get feedback directly and to work with people who originated the feedback. So you will get an answer very quickly.
Yeah, well, that's good. So basically go in, install it through your IDE, go on to the SonarSource website and get access to SonarQube or whatever tool you want.
Yes.
And then the community provides, end user feedback through those forums that you talked about. So that's
exactly
helpful.
Exactly. One of the other feature which is pretty good for developers is we decorate pull requests, which is we analyze pull requests, and we provide I would say hints on whether it's a good idea to merge or not. So I feel from a development point of view, these are the two main points where you can expect to interact with Sonar in the IDE on in the pull request.
So today you support Java, C, C++. What other languages?
C#, JavaScript, TypeScript, Python, Flex, Groovy, SQL, COBOL, PL1, RPG, Natural. What did I forget? We support
Go? I didn't hear Go.
I think we support Go. We support Rust. So we support 29 languages, and we also support infrastructure as code. So we support the 4 most adopted infrastructure as code languages. So
we have a lot of open source projects that could use these tools. Like I said, one of the biggest things where I think we can all collectively work together, and at the Linux Foundation we're building scorecards that will show like, hey, are you using a linter? Are you, where is your test coverage? And in cases where a project doesn't have that in place, we'll go in, our staff will literally go in and proactively, file an issue, introduce projects like this, free resources. We have a whole partner program. But anything that can shift left and make it easier for busy maintainers whose number one ask is more time to be able to write cleaner code in less time is in all of our collective interest, because we've now seen through things like Log4j what the ramifications of something that you might have caught otherwise in the upstream project during the development process, putting the entire world on hold as we try and track down and remediate these critical vulnerabilities.
Agree with that, and agree with the fact that open source project contributors should not have to bother and to spend time with their infrastructure. I think this is where you can play a big role, which is to provide the best of breed infrastructure for them, or at least a couple of options for this. To me, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's funny. You mentioned that developers are often very picky about what IDE they want, and we found trust me, Linus Torvalds works at the Linux Foundation. He's very particular about his development environment, and the kernel community is very particular. He wrote Git. And what we found is we're trying to curate, to your point, a range of options, right? The idea here is we want to make it easier for you to develop code. We want to have a set of different kinds of tools that you can curate an experience. We have some recommendations, but we'll allow you to sort of pick and choose what you think is the best tool for the job. And having access to tools like SonarLint, SonarQube, that's hugely helpful. We actually recently in June hired a full-time head of developer experience who goes around and works with release engineering teams, developer environment platform builders, tool vendors, and projects like yours to help provide those options. So if he hasn't already, I'm sure Robert, who is in that role, will be following up with you. And for us, the more people we can get using your tools, the better it is for our communities.
Yeah, I think that's definitely an area where we should collaborate, because also he's gonna have more weight in the choice of developers, or in the decision to take such tools than we can have. I mean, at the end of the day, we develop open source product, but we also have a business that we operate. So somehow we are selling something, even if it's free. So I think it's good that you have an evangelist internally, or a DevRel. Did you call it DevRel or Dev Advocate?
Developer experience. So it's making
developer
sure
experience.
that the development environment is as good as it possibly can be, that
Yes.
it's as easy as possible to write that clean code.
Yes.
And what we find is a lot of our development communities, if they know about a project or a tool like yours, they'll use it. They just they don't know. And so that, and then when they start using it, they're like, oh my God, this is actually incredibly useful. Our role is to curate those options and get access to these upstream developers at low or no cost, ideally no cost, so they can use it. And what ends up happening is, if you're a Kubernetes maintainer, you're in the top 1% of the world's developers, or a Linux maintainer, or a Node.js maintainer.
Yes.
And what they do is they bring stories back to their employers and say, hey, I'm using this great stuff in my open source project. I want to use this stuff at work. And sometimes it's vice versa, right? They're like, hey, I want to use the same stuff I'm using at work in the open source project, but I don't have access to it. Yeah. Either way, we want to make sure that our development environments for projects at the Linux Foundation are as good as they can possibly be. And that's where we really love to work with SonarSource to get the word out.
Yeah, but maybe I'm going to make a little bit of a controversial statement here, which is our products are free, and this is, I mean, for developers, they can use it, etc. But I think we should, as an industry, and we should also try to not just look at the cost, but also at the value. And I'm saying this because I feel that too often we tend to forget why we are using a product. And if you think about Sonar products, I mean, it's about reducing your risk. So, okay, I mean, for a developer, you never like to know that you send bugs to production, but it's kind of, you were never direct. I mean, you are not directly impacted. It's always come back. You have to fix it, etc. But the people who operate the product are going to be on the first line. But there is another aspect, which is, this is about productivity. So when we say, if we say, I don't want to use this product because it costs X, we should also think about, okay, but I'm always lacking time. I could do a more interesting job. I could innovate more and rework less. So at some stage, I feel we need to balance this out. And again, I'm not saying this specifically for Sonar, because for developers, the product is entirely free, and we feel this is the right model. But I also feel if I pay $5 per month and it saves me an hour per week, or 5% of my time, because at the end of the day, when you keep reading code that is not consistent, finding many problems, etc., you are wasting a little bit there, a little bit here and there, and you may end up, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes a day, which is an hour a week, which is 4 hours per month. Is my time worth $5 for 4 hours? Sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, even
Yeah.
much more, for sure.
I think one of the nice things, and we're working with a lot of communities to develop these exact tools, is there's sort of a new set of developer analytics tools that are coming out where you can, and particularly with generative AI tools that can categorize structured things very easily. You can look at like, okay, I'm spending this much time on new features. I'm spending this much time on bug fixes. I'm spending this much time on documentation and testing
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. And this is where, to your point, value starts to get really clear, right?
Yes.
Where like if I can shift, remediation, bug fixing, to a lower percentage, and I can fix, and refactoring, and I can, shift that to feature development, to, other forms of improvement, that's just an order of magnitude more valuable. And I'm not even including all the downstream implementations of when a problem is found in production that's
Yes.
critical, that we have
Yes.
to all now stop everything, go back, find it, remediate, patch, and so I think as that world, which is, you're seeing more and more of these tools come out. The Linux Foundation has a tool that we provide all of our projects, a developer analytics platform called LFX, that people will clearly see the value of these type of tools. Again, tools that shift left, that give right in that IDE the ability for folks to write cleaner, more secure code, has just a compounding effect across the entire software supply chain.
Absolutely. Fully agree with that.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking time, and you're we're grateful to have SonarSource as a member of the Linux Foundation. It's terrific. We've got our new Linux Foundation EU organization. We have more and more European companies, and you're obviously in Switzerland, so I may offend you by calling you European. But,
You're not. I'm French, so
okay, so you're based in Switzerland, but French.
exactly.
So I'll ride that middle. But again, we look forward to collaborating with you on a variety of initiatives in the future, and let's work together to help these projects get access to great tools, and in the end, write
Yeah,
better, cleaner code that'll get adopted by the world.
sounds very good, and I really enjoyed the conversation. We are really happy to be a part of the Linux Foundation community. And yeah, thanks very much, Jim.
All right, appreciate it. Go check out in your IDE, SonarSource. Go check out their website. Anybody, I mean, there's no downside in at least checking out these tools to try and write better code.